Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, if this Raiders team were to exceed expectations in 2023, what would they need to do? That plus a whole lot more comes up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for August 23rd, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. Of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thanks so much. We definitely appreciate you. About to get over that 8,000 subscription threshold, so we definitely appreciate that. The show is growing in a major way, and my man Ari has so much pride. He comes in and tells me about it each and every day. Q, did you see this? Q, did you see that? And I have to always let him down and say, Ari, I didn't get a chance to check it out today. He's like, man, you got to go check it out. The YouTube page is looking really good. So shout out to my man Ari. Does a great job each and every day, making sure we're up on YouTube, looking good and sounding good. You can check out Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, you can, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. It's funny, we had a tweet in segment number 3 of the show on Tuesday. I got a tweet that I got and received during my radio show on Tuesday. I'm actually going to bring that to the table coming up in segment number 2 of today's show. So you hit me up on Twitter. I do get your feedback in on the show, and I think with the conversation we'll have in segment number 2, this tweet will be perfect for it. But in segment number 3, of course, we'll get your calls and texts. Again, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. In segment number 2, going to talk about this team, this 2023 version of the Raiders, and for them to exceed the expectations, which please believe the expectations are not real high. Right? I mean, I've told stories before about the ultimate division crossover that we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and it's a little different than the one we've done for the most part each and every year in preparation for the season. And we recorded it on Sunday, and I'm not too sure when the Locked On Podcast Network is going to actually drop it. But for the most part, everyone expected the Raiders to finish last. I think host of Locked On Chiefs, I think one of the guys from the Chiefs didn't expect them to finish last, expected the Broncos too. But for the most part, the expectations as we went through the conversation for the Raiders weren't a whole lot. So we'll talk about for the Raiders to exceed those expectations and for what most people on the outside believe that the Raiders are going to do in 2023, what needs to happen. I got some thoughts from a listener, a really good friend of mine, and then also I got my thoughts coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, I'd like to hit you with the news and notes of the day. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. All you got to do is post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Off top, the Raiders made a roster move on Tuesday, and that was placing linebacker Darian Butler on the reserve injured list, so that means his season is over before it got started, and that's unfortunate. Darian Butler was an undrafted free agent a year ago out of Arizona State. He was very comfortable and very familiar with Antonio Pierce, the linebackers coach. Thought maybe he was going to be able to take that step forward this upcoming year, knowing that he did a lot of special teams in 2022, and well, lo and behold, he's on the injured reserve. He's done. Season is over. So what that does is that lessens the depth in the linebacking room for the Raiders in that defense. And the linebacking room is one of those rooms that I've been talking about quite a bit that I still am a little cautious about how good they're going to be potentially from the linebacker room. Like, you got Divine Diablo. You feel like he has a potential to take that next step. Robert Spillane, you feel like he has the potential to be a good linebacker. Luke Masterson, they're expecting him to take another step as being an undrafted free agent a year ago. He got a lot of attention. He played quite a bit. Matter of fact, in 2022, they're expecting him to do a lot better in 2023. So that's kind of a thin room, right? Amari Burney is the 6th-round pick that they got out of Florida, and he looks pretty promising so far through preseason, 2 preseason games. But, again, it's preseason. He's a rookie. There's going to be some growing pains. So there's not a lot of proven depth in that linebacker room. And I'm not saying Darian Butler was proven depth because he's not. Curtis Bolton, he actually played pretty well against the Rams in preseason game number 2 on last Saturday. So he's a guy that's normally a special teamer. Maybe he's a guy that has to go out there and play a little bit of defense. And, again, from what I saw on Saturday, I think that that's okay. But again, got to be very cautious about that and basically judging what you're seeing in preseason and thinking it's going to translate to the regular season. So again, I think that room is pretty thin as far as experience and depth goes. They have Devon Diablo and Robert Spillane, and those are the guys that are probably the most experienced in that linebacker room. So who's going to step up? Are they going to be able to take that next step and be complimentary on that Raiders defense? And can Luke Masterson step up and be that guy as well? So Darian Butler, second-year guy out of Arizona State on the reserve injured list. He's done for the season. My guy, Tashawn Reed from The Athletic, he does a really good job. I mentioned on Tuesday I wasn't going to be able to go to practice. They didn't practice till 12:30, and this is the time of year when they start transitioning to practicing later. Early in training camp, I love it because they practice super early in the morning. I have an opportunity to be there, check out practice, talk to the coaches and players, then make a beeline to the radio station, do my show, do this, that, and the other. Everything is all good, and all in a timely fashion. Well, later on, all of a sudden it becomes practice at like 12:30, and then talking to the media at 2:30. Well, my radio show starts at 2, so I don't really have an opportunity to do all of that. So I wasn't there on Tuesday, but Tashawn Reed always does a really good job of pointing out who's practicing and who's not. That's like the first thing he does each and every day at practice, and it's something that I should really get in the habit of doing, something that Tashawn has down to a science. He does it a really good job, and most people, when, hey, have you seen this guy out here? Have you seen that guy out there? Check with Tashawn. Tashawn always knows, and that's really what we do. So I want to tip my cap to Tashawn because he does a really good job at seeing who's in and who's out as far as practice. So on Tuesday, Tashawn said running back Britton Brown was a guy that wasn't practicing. Wide receiver Chris Lacey, guard Dylan Parham. I believe he's still dealing with a head injury. Of course, it hasn't been confirmed, but he left the 49er preseason game with what appeared to be a head injury, so I'm assuming that that's a concussion. Defensive end Chandler Jones. I'm concerned about this one. And today we talked to head coach Josh McDaniels around 11:15 this morning. We're going to ask him about Chandler Jones. If it's not me, it'll be somebody. If Vinny doesn't ask him right off top because he always asks questions first, then I'll definitely ask about Chandler Jones. We have not seen Chandler Jones since the second day of joint practices against the Niners. That was the last time I saw Chandler Jones at practice was day 1 against the Niners. Day 2, never saw him. Didn't see him in the game on Sunday. Didn't see him all week long last week. Of course, they were practicing in L.A. Didn't see him in the game on Saturday against the Rams, and he wasn't there on Tuesday. So Chandler Jones is a guy I'm very concerned what's going on with him. For the Raiders defense to take that next step, I know what Max Crosby is going to bring to the table. I feel like I know what Tyree Wilson can eventually bring to the table. Chandler Jones has got to play better than he did in 2022. He's got to be a complimentary piece. Rich Gannon, he talked on, well, he didn't talk on the show, but I had what he had to say on the show on Tuesday, and he was talking about the Raiders defense, and he was saying for them to take that next step, really a lot of it's going to rely on Chandler Jones being that guy. Well, all of a sudden he hasn't been out there for what feels like a couple weeks. What's going on with Chandler Jones? So that's definitely going to be a question I have written down already to ask Coach McDaniels about today when we talked to him around 11:15 in the morning. Defensive tackle Bilal Nichols was also not there. Defensive tackle Byron Young was not there. Defensive end Isaac Rochelle was not there. Linebacker Darian Butler, now we know why. He's on the reserve injured list. He's done. Cornerback Jacorian Bennett and cornerback Nate Hobbs. 2 more guys that I'm pretty concerned about. Jacorian Bennett, I heard that he was working through some things, right? And that's why he didn't participate in the preseason game on Saturday against the Rams. And so him not practicing on Tuesday is a little bit concerning. And Nate Hobbs as well. 2 guys that I think are expected to be some big-time contributors to the Raiders defense this year. And I think that Marcus Peters, Jacorian Bennett, and Nate Hobbs is a nice little 1-2-3 punch as far as the starting cornerbacks go. But if Jacorian Bennett's not healthy, he can't go. So then that would probably kick Nate Hobbs to the outside and Tyler Hall into the slot. And I do think that Nate Hobbs is at his best when he's in the slot. So I'd like to see Jacorian Bennett come back sooner rather than later. Another guy I have written down to ask Coach McDaniels about later on this morning. Also, Hunter Renfrow was practicing with a red jersey on Tuesday. He was nursing a shoulder injury. So hopefully Hunter is back sooner rather than later as well. As we know, cutdowns are on the 29th, and the first week of the season against the Denver Broncos is coming up sooner rather than later. September 11th is when everything gets underway. So hopefully Hunter Renfrow is really good to go. He's going to be a key piece to this offense, I do believe. So that was just a little update of guys that were practicing and weren't practicing on Tuesday, according to Tashawn Reed from The Athletic. As I mentioned, we'll be talking to head coach Josh McDaniels this morning at 11:15 Pacific time. That's approximate, of course, in the Intermountain Health Performance Center. And then 12:30 to 2:30 is practice, open to the media. There's a small portion for video and and in pictures and this, that, and the other. I won't be in attendance from the 12:30 to 2:30. I got to make a beeline back to the radio station and get ready for the show. And then at 2:30, select players will be in the media room talking to the media. But at 11:15, I'll definitely be in attendance for head coach Josh McDaniels. Want to ask him in particular about Chandler Jones, and definitely want to ask him about Jacorian Bennett as well. Again, two guys that I expect to be some big-time contributors to this Raiders defense. They're going to need those guys if they want to take that next step. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. News and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, can this team exceed expectations in 2023? If they can, what do they need to do? We'll talk about that in segment number 2 after I tell you about Bird Dogs. And Bird Dogs make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you will get a sway slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dog uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. What you need to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or promo code LockedOnNFL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. Nobody does. Everybody I talk to that says, man, I went and got some Bird Dogs after you mentioned it, and I used that promo code LockedOnNFL, got that white tech hat for free. Nobody ever wants to take these things off, I promise. Check them out today. Again, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about this Raiders team in 2023 and the expectations. And there's not a lot of high expectations right now for the silver and black. And I have said it many times, I think that's okay. I had the high expectations for the team a year ago, and we know how that shook out. So I think that them flying under the radar, nobody really talking about them too much. I know here and there folks are starting to talk about them. I played the sound from Rich Gannon on Tuesday's show. Colin Cowherd actually played the sound on my radio show. It's 5 minutes long. I would love to play it here, but it's literally 5 minutes long, and it would take up just about the whole segment. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that right now. But trust and believe, he was giving Josh McDaniels a lot of credit. He was giving Jimmy G and the offense a lot of credit, and he was believing that the defense could take some steps and was talking about having guys in certain positions, having alphas like a Max Crosby, like a Josh Jacobs, like a Jimmy G, Devontae Adams, having Josh McDaniels be a really good head coach. You know, all these different things Colin Cowherd was saying. So he's starting to come around on the Raiders. But then there's some on the other side of things, like NFL Network's Adam Rank, who actually have the Raiders going 0-10 in their first 10 games, which I think is just completely dumb. You know, and Adam Rank was a guy last year that had very high expectations for the Raiders. So maybe because he got burned, he said, yep, know what, I'm not giving them no love anymore. 0-10 to start the season, I think is silly. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. We've seen it happen before. I just don't think that this unit would let that happen. And, I mean, I look at the schedule and I believe it's tough, but I don't believe that they're going to go 0-10. Hell, I believe that there's a great chance that they're 1-0 after week 1. Right? I mean, that's just looking at it. I think they could very easily be 1-0 after the first week. Denver doesn't look at me. I don't look at Denver as a team that, like, scares me. I think, oh, man, what are they going to do? And, hell, I don't really get scared by Buffalo week 2, even though it's in Buffalo. It's a home opener for the Bills. I know that that's a ruckus environment, but okay, so what? So, I mean, those first 2 road games, they don't scare me. I think that they're tough because they're both on the road, but, I mean, what NFL game's not tough? So, you know, for Adam Rank to say that the Raiders were going to go start the season 0-10, I think that that's just silly. But, you know, I mean, they've got to make their living and share their thoughts and feelings the way that they want to. And again, the Raiders flying under the radar, I think that that's okay. So on my radio show on Tuesday, I threw the question out there about expectations. As a matter of fact, I'm looking to make sure I get the wording correctly. I said, do you see a scenario where the Raiders are better than a lot of people expect? Are you starting to believe in this Raiders team in 2023, or are you still proceeding with caution? And so there was a lot of good responses that I got on my radio show, and one I received by way of Twitter that I never got to. Bill out of Pittsburgh, Cali, real good dude, always shows up in Las Vegas for the games. He's always out here. He's always good to catch up with, and I spent a lot of time of my life in Pittsburgh growing up as a youngster. That's where I originally lived, was in Pittsburgh, California. So we always talk about Pittsburgh whenever we get together. But he sent this message to me. He said, Q, I need to see our defense make stops and not just let teams drive down the field on us. Still need to see us do better in the red zone. And finally, if Jimmy G stays healthy, I think it gives us a great chance. That'll get me excited, but I'll be at that will get me excited, but I will be at every game. So let's go. Ready to party, Q? Go Raiders. That's Bill out of Pittsburgh, Cali, and I definitely appreciate Bill in that message. And, yeah, I mean, the defense, again, that's where it starts. For me, I have my thoughts on what's going to, make this team be a better team than what most people expect, and defense has got to be where it's at. I was talking about the defense last year, and a lot of people got mad at me. Why you keep on talking about the defense? The defense doesn't have all the money invested in it. The Raiders didn't do anything to address the defense. You shouldn't be mad at the defense. I'm like, man, those guys still get checks. Those guys still have pride. Those guys still know that they have to go out there and stop somebody, right? And there was more times than not that they didn't. And there's other times that the offense didn't complement the defense when they were playing decent, and that's, a collective team effort, but it's definitely what starts with the defense, like Bill said. So I understand where he's coming from. The red zone has been an issue for the longest time. We all know that. That has got to be improved. I feel pretty good about what the Raiders have done in the red zone so far through 2 preseason games, and I know Jimmy G only played 1 drive, but I do think that with Jimmy G and his ability to throw the ball into the end zone, I think that that's such a game changer, something that we haven't seen for the longest. We've seen so many times the Raiders throw the ball short of the goal line and expect a player to make a break a tackle to get into the end zone. And a lot of times Josh Jacobs ends up running the ball into the end zone, which is great, right? I mean, he scored 12 touchdowns a season ago, so we know he has a nose for the end zone. He can do that. But, man, the Raiders have to make a habit of throwing the ball into the end zone. I keep going back to that play that I saw Jimmy G make on the indoor facility, and Dave Ziegler was standing underneath the goalpost, where Jimmy G just threw a dart into the back of the end zone. Devontae caught it, and Dave Ziegler yelled out, "Nice ball, 10! Nice ball, 10!" Like he was fired up because he knew what that was all about, right? He knew that that's what they have to do more of. Throw the rock into the end zone and get 7. Turn out to get 7 as opposed to 3 like the Raiders have done. So, yeah, the red zone has got to be a whole lot better, and I think Jimmy G will have a lot to do with that, and I think Josh McDaniels will dial up a lot of play calls throwing it into the end zone. I believe the really good teams throw it into the end zone and find ways to get open and score that touchdown. So that's what Bill's looking forward to, and I definitely think that he's onto something. Like if the Raiders just do really good in those areas, they'll be a lot better team. What I'm looking at, and I have 4 things that I'm looking at that will make me feel like this team is taking the right step in headed in the right direction in 2023. 1, I'm going to start with the defense, just like Bill. Defense must continue to make plays like we've seen in a small sample size in training camp and preseason. I've harped on turnovers, and I've harped on turnovers some more, right? 40-20 is what I've been talking about. The Raiders' goals for 2023, in my opinion, should be 40 sacks and 20 interceptions. Not saying that they're going to get that, but that's what they should aim for. If they get anywhere near there, they're going to win some games. They're going to give the ball back to their offense and give themselves opportunities to score more points, and more points, right? 40 sacks, 20 interceptions. Again, that's what my number as far as goals for the Raiders should be as far as I'm concerned. Josh Jacobs needs to be back by week 1. I would like to see him back. Honestly, I'd like to see him back before this Cowboy game on Saturday, but if not before the game, like Monday. Get into camp and get a little bit of, run at the facility and get hit a little bit in camp just to kind of get calloused up, like Josh McDaniels said last year when he played in the Hall of Fame game. Running backs need to get hit. I'd like to see Josh Jacobs back no later than Monday of next week. Not saying that that's going to happen, but would like to see that. So Josh Jacobs is another element to this team heading in the right direction. Jimmy, continuing to grow in this offense, take command of this offense, and take advantage of all the weapons around him. And I mean all the weapons. I'm talking Devontae. I'm talking Hunter. I'm talking Jacoby. Josh Jacobs, as long as he's there. I'm talking about Michael Mayer, the tight end, right? DeAndre Carter, who I thought was in a battle with Trey Tucker for a roster spot. After Saturday, I feel like he's already solidified his spot, and maybe Trey, they'll bring him along a little bit slower. Don't think he's quite ready to take that role. He's just a little inconsistent with his hands, but he's got speed, so use that speed as well. Like, I want to see all these elements added to the mix, right? Take advantage of all the weapons around Jimmy G. And finally, something that enough people don't talk about, I think, special teams be an advantage to the Raiders as opposed to, well, just the kicking game and the punting game being really good with Daniel Carlson and A.J. Cole. How about the return game be special? DeAndre Carter showed a little something on Saturday against the Rams. Trey Tucker showed a little something on Saturday against the Rams. They've got to find a way, and it's been a very long time since the Raiders have had a dominant return man. Amir Abdullah did the best he could last year. There were so many times I felt like he was going to break one and take it to the house. I felt like he was 1 block away, maybe 2 blocks away from taking it to the house. He told me that they were 1 or 2 blocks away and that he missed the block. I'd like to see a guy like DeAndre Carter or a guy like Trey Tucker finally find a way to give the Raiders an advantage when it comes to field position. Put the Raiders in good position. Get plus yardage. On kickoffs, you're giving 25 yards, right? Get it to the 30. Get it to the 35 consistently. Put them in a nice position. Punt returns. Get a little wiggle going, right? Get up the field. Give the Raiders shorter fields. If they can find an advantage, if they can find a way to make their kick return and punt return dangerous and weapons, that's just going to help the offense that much more. So, yeah, we know that A.J. Cole, we know Daniel Carlson are dynamic. I think that the kick and punt coverage teams are going to be doing a really good job. I like what I've seen so far. Have they had a couple breakdowns here and there? Sure. But they're working on it right now. They're working on what best fits them best. So I think that the coverage units are going to be really good. I want to see the return units be really good as well. So for the team, if the Raiders are going to exceed expectations, for me, what they need to do is the defense has to continue to make plays like we've seen so far in training camp and preseason. Josh Jacobs needs to be there week 1. Jimmy's got to take command of the offense, take advantage of all the weapons around him, and special teams has to be that. Special. Take advantage of the kicking game, punt game, kick return, punt return. Coverage has got to be on point as well. I think the special teams unit could really do that and really be an element that the Raiders have not had for some very long years. I mean, you tell me, I'll wait the last time that the Raiders had a dangerous, explosive kick return and punt returner. Really. I mean, there's you can say guys here and there, like, Hunter Renfro's done a good job. There's times I thought he was going to take it to the house. He didn't have an opportunity to. What was it? Dwayne Harris? Is that his name? It doesn't sound right, but you know who I'm talking about when he had the 99-yard kick return against the Broncos at the Coliseum, when everyone thought that you don't pick up the ball, don't pick up the ball. Oh, pick up the ball. Oh, run with it. Keep going. Yeah, I mean, that was a nice veteran play. He took it to the house, but they haven't had a consistent, explosive return game. They just haven't had that guy. If the Raiders could find that guy, that would be such a huge advantage for them moving forward. So that's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of what this Raiders team needs to do if they're going to be a really good unit, a much better team than most people expect in 2023. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts are coming up next as we close out the show for segment number 3, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get to that right after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you've got access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you got to do is post your job. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Right now, LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Jordan, Oregon. He's calling to talk about Aiden O'Connell and how he's pretty pumped up about him and what he could possibly do moving forward. Here he is, Jordan, Oregon.
What's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon calling in here. I just wanted to give you a shout out for all the basically pre and post game, everything you're doing for the Raiders right now. You're putting in a solid effort, and I just wanted to let you know it's very much appreciated. And this season, I've actually tried to kind of widen the umbrella of friends that listen to you. Just anybody I can, I try to refer them to your pregame and just everything you've been doing this preseason. It's been good stuff, and people are impressed. But anyway, the reason I wanted to call is just like everybody, pretty stoked on O'Connell, and I just want to bring up the point. It's about time something, kind of fell in our lap. And I know he didn't fall in our lap. We could have, gone a whole different direction, and it's not like he was a player that just everybody was seeking. But I will say there's been a few times in the last, since like 19, that we've had some of these 4th, 5th rounders end up turning into big time playmaker for us, whether it be Max or Renfro or, potentially O'Connell. And so I just want to say, man, my point with this guy is if you go back and just even look at him at Purdue, just from the walk-on standpoint to, he actually was on campus for a couple of years, not even playing, just, kind of doing the redshirt thing. And then finally got a couple seasons in, the guy looks much smaller, just like 2 years ago. If you go look at his tape, you kind of see a slender upper body build. Even his throwing motion looks a little bit shorter and just looks, I don't know, he just doesn't have the stature he does now. So with that being said, I know we've all been around a guy or two in your life that really gets large and big later than the rest of us. He's 24 right now, but this kid could still be like kind of coming into his own as far as his physical capabilities. And so, yeah, that's all I have for you. Peace out, bro.
Jordan, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, Aiden has been the talk, right? He's giving Raider Nation hope. And I believe that if Jimmy goes down, that Raider Nation would be okay with Aiden O'Connell jumping into action. Now, again, we hope that you don't see him at all in 2023. At least that's what I hope, that you don't see Aiden O'Connell. That means Jimmy G is out there and he's playing well. But I do believe that this staff is probably getting more and more comfortable with Aiden O'Connell. And in case of emergency, they may break glass and let him go out there and spin it a few times. I think Brian Hoyer is still valuable on the roster. I really do. But I can see a scenario where at some point Aiden O'Connell is the number 2 quarterback and Brian Hoyer number 3. I just kind of look at that way. And, honestly, it might not even matter what the actual number is. As far as, the game day, who dresses out or not with the new quarterback rule and how you can have that third quarterback in case of emergency really break glass so you don't end up with a 49ers-Eagles situation from the playoffs a year ago. But I do think that Aiden O'Connell's getting more and more comfortable with being an NFL quarterback, even though it's only been 2 preseason games. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Modesto Dave out the 209. It says, hey, Q. I was listening to Tuesday's Locked On Raiders podcast, and your topic about the national media starting to take notice of the Raiders brought me to ask about a bigger topic that I've always been fascinated by: national media versus local media. For years now, the national media has disrespected and has had low expectations regarding the Raiders. This frustrates us Raider fans, of course, but unfortunately, more times than not, the national media proves to be right. I find local media beat writers are genuinely more optimistic about local teams, but in Raiders' case, they are usually wrong the majority of the time. I listened to a national outlet talk about local team beat writers saying that not all local beat writers have to toe the company line a lot of time to maintain access to players and coaches. They aren't censored in what they report, but they can always give a true narrative on a player or topic or situation. What is your experience in regards to this topic? As a longtime Raiders fan, I also see a lot more disagreement in local media regarding team or player. Who are your favorite national reporters? The big problem with them is no media coverage at all unless it's negative. As longtime Sacramento Kings fan last year was a perfect example of national media completely ignoring Kings and then scrambling to find a take when it was obvious the Kings were going to make the playoffs. I just think some in-depth discussion of national versus local media pros and cons would be a great topic to discuss. Modesto Dave from the 209. Thank you for that text, my man. Very lengthy text right there, and honestly, it could be a very long discussion when you talk about the national and local media. I've heard the take of, local media has to be careful or you're going to get your access limited. That's not true. I could guarantee you that that's not true. There is people, and I won't name names because I'm not disrespectful. There is people that cover the Raiders right now on a local level that I'm not saying that they say disrespectful things, but they have no business covering the team. Right? There's some, and sometimes it's very embarrassing when you hear certain questions that are asked the way that they're posed. It's like, what are we doing here? Right? And sometimes there'll be national media there in the media center, and they'll all of a sudden look up at you like, what the hell is that? Right? I mean, there's just some questions. And like I said, everyone doesn't need to have access. And I don't like to say that like I'm above someone, but you have to just have a level of professionalism. And sometimes it's just not there. And you can see it and you can hear it. And it's not from lack of effort. It's just because they're, just haven't been taught correctly how to do things. The national media, I would say that from their standpoint, and I guess I can speak on it really well since I do both now, national media and local. It's just, I guess that name like an ESPN or NFL Network or Fox Sports or whatever the case may be, and it's national, it carries more weight because it reaches more people. So when they come in, a lot of times it's like, Omar Ruiz from the NFL Network, which is one of my good buddies. Oh, he's coming in to talk to Coach Josh McDaniels. He's going to sit down for a one-on-one. Okay, cool. I'd love to sit down with a one-on-one, but I don't get that, right? And that's just unfortunate. But a lot of times the national media is looked at as a bigger priority when they do come visit because they're not there all the time. And, they've got the bigger outlet and they've got the bigger reach as well. So a lot of times those guys will reach out. But, sometimes the national media doesn't really understand the team like a local media would. I like to go to the local media for the thoughts on like the Raiders or even like John McClain, who is a national guy. But if I want to know about the Texans, I go to him, right? I don't go to Ian Rappaport for Texans information. I go to a guy that's around the Texans all the time because he'll give me a better idea. And a lot of times the national guys are getting information from the local guys. So it's a lot of give or take. There's not a whole lot different. It's just really the reach as far as I'm concerned. And like I said, now that I do both, ESPN and I'm local, I see the best of both worlds as far as I'm concerned. So it's kind of give or take. You got to pick and choose what you prefer. Some people prefer the Nationals perspective, and others prefer the local perspective. And I know for me, and this is still growing for me, like this is a growing process for me. Sometimes I'll see something and it'll look right or it'll make a lot of sense, and I try my very best to be objective and not get too high or too low. Some Raider fans like that, some don't, and that's okay. But I try to not oversell something and say, oh man, and like fanboy out, because that doesn't do anybody any good. I don't want to be the guy that comes and delivers news to you and says that, oh, this is going to happen, this, that, and the other, and then it's completely opposite. It's like, well, what were you seeing, Q? And it's because, I let my fandom get in the way. And, sometimes Raider fans get mad, especially like when they look at Raider Nation Radio 920 and they're like, well, you guys aren't all even Raider fans. Well, actually, that's a good thing. If you get the sounds and you get the thoughts and you get the objective from guys that aren't Raider fans, they don't have an agenda to make you happy, right? So it's easy for me to, see success and get excited about it because I'm a lifelong Raider fan. But I also had to really teach myself to be objective so I don't come in and get too hype and too high on something and sell someone a bill of goods that's not correct and not accurate. So most of the times when you see guys cover teams, they're not fans of that team. And there's a reason for that. Just like when I cover the Cowboys, I try to cover the Raiders the same as I cover the Cowboys. I'm not a fan of the Cowboys. I'm not a fan of the Texans, but I've covered those teams. I'm not a Baylor fan, but I covered Baylor. I didn't go to Baylor, right? So I try to cover everybody the same with the same objective kind of lens, because that's when you get the most information, the most accurate information, the real truth as much as you can. Now, you're never going to make everybody happy. Someone's always going to have a complaint, and it's just one of those situations you got to deal with. But as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of how it is. It's just, I think that it's an advantage when you don't have a bunch of fans of one team that are covering a team, because a lot of times they'll kind of get, they'll kind of get blinded with that team's glasses on, right? And so I know that, like I said, a lot of fans get mad. Oh, this guy's not even a Raider fan. Doesn't matter. That's very rare that happens. You get the opportunity. I'm very blessed that I'm in the opportunity to do that, but I try not to let that cloud my vision of this team, if that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, it's a very lengthy response. I apologize for that. And, again, I can go on so many different angles. This is a conversation that we could spend the whole 30 minutes of a podcast talking about if we want to really get down to that. Maybe that's a good off-season conversation, but now that it's almost the regular season, I definitely don't have time to break it all the way down, but I think it's a very good question, Modesto Dave. Thanks so much for the text. Got a call from Brian in Pittsburgh. He's calling to talk about the defense. It talks about an interview I did with Eric Allen and the conversation we had when it came to turnovers and in particular getting INTs. Here's Brian in Pittsburgh.
What's going on, Q? It's Brian over here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Just listening to your Monday morning pod here on my way to work. Everybody's talking about Aiden O'Connell, but one thing I want to talk about that defense, man, and I want to go back to one of the interviews you had in the off season. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Eric Allen you had on there with you, and I'm going to go back to the number 21. The number 21, I believe you said, the Raiders would have a number back in the day with Eric Allen and all them guys on the edge, on the corners. How many interceptions they're going to get this year? Well, I know it's preseason, but hey, them guys on defense are flying around. I think we got 2 interceptions right now through 2 games. But you and I both know, and I'm sure all Raider Nation knows, that should be 4 minimum. Saturday night, Amik should have had that pick 6. That was a beautiful play, cut right in front of the receiver. Just gotta get them bricks out of your hands, catch that ball, and go the other way. Those are the plays you sit there, you talk about being made, just like how Isaiah pulled him out, making that play. It was right to him, but he had to make the play. Another one, Duke Shelley in the first preseason game against the Niners. That guy had it that was right in his breadbasket. And if you ask me, the Raiders shut out the Niners. That was a fluke touchdown. That was a 34-0 game. And last game, we only allowing 17 points or something like that. I think 17 or 14. That defense is looking nice, man. They're ball hawking around that ball. If they pick both those off, that's 4 interceptions through 2 games. I could be missing one. I'm wrong though. I could be wrong. Who knows? But 4. You keep that pace going. That's 34 interceptions on the season. So let's go, man. Let's hope this defense keeps flying around. Let's hope Farva keeps balling out there, making Raider Nation proud. We're going to all start growing mustaches. I just can't wait, man. I can't wait for the season to get here. 3 more weeks, guys. All right, Raiders.
Brian, thanks so much for the call. And yeah, man, I'm glad you brought up the turnovers, right? Something I talked about in segment number 2. 40 sacks, 20 picks. That's my goal that I felt the Raiders should be aiming for. And that's what Eric Allen said that Willie Shaw, when he was the defensive coordinator, that was the number he put up on the whiteboard when the training camp opened up. All right, guys, 20 interceptions is what we're going to get. Who's going to help us get that? Who's going to lead the team in getting us to 20? Who, is it going to be you, EA? Is it going to be you, C. Wood? Is it going to be you, Kirk Morrison or whatever? Whoever was playing at the time, right? I mean, I don't know the whole roster, but who's going to go out there and make the plays? Who's going to get the interceptions? And all those guys would compete to try to get that ball, and they wanted to lead the team in interceptions. They wanted to be the guy to help that team get there. And so when he saw 20, he was like, that's achievable because I'm going to get 8 or 9 myself. C. Wood's going to get 8 or 9 himself. That's already up to 16, 17. All we need to do is have a couple linebackers pick up a couple, maybe a couple safeties pick up a couple. We're over that 20 number. We've done what we're supposed to do. And that's what I think that they need to do. I've asked Patrick Graham. I've asked Coach McDaniels if there's, some kind of a number, some kind of goal. I asked Max Crosby. He said no. I think that there should be. And I'm sure that there is some kind of number, maybe not number, but I'm sure that they have some kind of goal that they have set in the room that they don't have to tell me about. I'm okay with that. But I like that approach, and that's what EA has told me multiple times, that Willie Shaw, when he was the defensive coordinator of the Raiders, that's what they would do. So I think that that's something that should be achievable. And I'll tell you right now, look, the Raiders should have what? They should have 6 already. They have 2 interceptions, but as you mentioned, they should have at least 4. And then again, maybe 5 because Amari Burney should have had 1 as well. So, Shelley should have had 1 in the end zone. Amik should have had that pick 6. They have 2 already. And Burney, that would have been 5. But so far, through 2 preseason games, they have 5 sacks, 7 tackles for losses, 2 INTs, 1 return for 6, and 6 passes defense. That's not bad through 2 games. Not bad. You do the math what that would be over the course of a regular season, 17 games. It's not a bad defensive year. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. They're going to average that every game. Not saying that at all. But that's a good start, and habits are forming right now in training camp. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate you. We'll get one more text in, and I know I'm getting a little short on time, getting a little long with my answers. I'm sorry about that. This text is from Scott. He says, Q, it's preseason with all the caveats that come with that. But overall, I don't think they could have asked for much better than they've shown so far. Maybe the defense converting more turnover opportunities. I like Tucker a lot, but I have to wonder if he's getting a little DHB in him at times. The real upside is that these are mostly the 2s, and they're being very competitive. So while they might not be the starters, it looks like the Raiders will have some depth that they have been lacking for a long time. Hopefully that means the inevitable injury won't derail the season. That's a text from Scott. And, yeah, that's the thing. The Raiders have a lot of top-end talent, but what's derailed them for multiple years is the talent behind them. They haven't had depth, and that's why the Raiders went out and got a nice blend of veterans, and then they brought in a lot of younger guys too. So they have a lot of veterans that can help show the young guys and kind of teach them and groom them and bring them along. But the veterans could play right now, and if the young guys like a Trey Tucker, if he sits behind DeAndre Carter, and, yeah, he gets into the game, but he's not the primary guy, then all of a sudden when DeAndre Carter is done and his 1 year is up, then all of a sudden it's the Trey Tucker show. Right? And that goes with, the running backs like Zamir White and Britton Brown. That goes with, tight ends. Obviously, you got Austin Hooper out there. Michael Mayer is supposed to be that guy. I think that they'll work hand in hand. Tyree Wilson eventually will be the guy for Chandler Jones if all goes right. Byron Young will be the guy for, Bilal Nichols if all goes right. There's a lot of youth sitting behind some of these veterans that can eventually take over and really hold it down. Marcus Peters ain't going to be there forever. He's like a 1-year guy. Maybe they re-sign him to 1 more year if everything goes right. But Ja'Cory Bennett's got to step up and be the dude. someone else has got to step up and be a player as well, right? So I think that what Dave Ziegler is trying to do is trying to stack this roster with a lot of talent. And even if they double up or triple up in certain positions, it's because they're building that depth and that cupboard of talent, like you mentioned. So, Scott, thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. And that's all I got time for on today's show. Went a little bit longer than I was supposed to. Tomorrow, Raider Meatloaf. I got a text from Stabler's Ghost. You'll get those on tomorrow's show. We'll have news and notes. We'll have plenty of conversation as we completely turn the page from the Rams game and start focusing in on the final preseason game, which is the Dallas Cowboys. We'll do that starting tomorrow on the show. Of course, we'll hear from head coach Josh McDaniels about 11:15 this morning. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.